But on one of their missions, while they're taking out these bad guys, they discover an entire warehouse full of human trafficked children. And so she's questioning whether she should be part of this team. Cruz tells her, I know this mission is terrible and it's asking you to face things that you don't want to face. But if you choose not to fight, not fighting is what leads to warehouses being full of children.
Why? It's Roots.
Welcome to Why It's Straight Television. I'm your host, Matthew Salanoa, a filmmaker of over 17 years, here to bring you the filmmaker's perspective on television. This actress I've become a really kind of a big fan of, or I'm becoming a big fan of, Genesis Rodriguez, appeared in the movie Tusk back in 2014. And I am one of the weirdos who really sees that as a fantastic movie. I'm going to get into it on my other podcast, Why It's Great Movies, where I'm going to discuss why I think it's a great movie. But I just thought she was so standout. In my opinion, while everyone in that show was great, and I do think Kevin Smith's script was solid, I felt that Genesis Rodriguez was standout. Unlike most other Kevin Smith movies, which are mostly kind of jokes, they're kind of jokey movies, but also kind of slice of life, I felt like Genesis Rodriguez gave Tusk the most legitimate quality to that film because she was just so real and raw. She took Kevin Smith's dialogue and really she made it sound like it came from her. And I thought that's a quality in actors that is very rare. Not so rare. Obviously, there's a lot of great actors, and unfortunately, a lot of great actors who don't get the limelight. But I just feel like you see a lot of stuff in a lot of movies and shows where, for whatever reason, the performances don't quite come off. But whenever you hit a gem, when someone performs so well that you forget that someone wrote the dialogue, I think that is worth noting. And I think Kevin Smith already kind of achieved legitimacy with Red State. I mean, all of his movies are legitimate as far as I'm concerned. But I know the way most people see movies is the drama is the real movie and everything else is just for kicks. And I don't really agree with that. But nonetheless, again, Genesis Rodriguez was standout. She made the movie real in what really was a movie that was kind of a joke, but played straight. She made it a legitimate experience. And she's acting right next to Haley Joel Osment and Justin Long and the incredible Michael Parks. Well, she's not in the scene with him. But I just thought she was so standout that when she pops up in things, I try to catch them if I can. Not that I've caught everything, but I was happy to see her in the 4:30 movie. And then when I saw this amazing clip, there's an amazing clip from Lioness season 2, which turned out to be her first scene, where she's walking up from, she's a helicopter pilot. She's walking up, they're on an army base in Iraq, and she's storming up to Gamora, the wonderful, amazing Zoe Saldana, who I've thought has been great since Pirates of the Caribbean, where how young must she have been in that movie? Because she still looks so young. But Zoe Saldana is another one of those actresses who just gets there. She makes it real, and she's awesome. So to see Genesis Rodriguez go up against Zoe Saldana, and they have this shouting match, something has happened that cost the lives of people, and it seems to be Zoe Saldana's fault. And their performance, their interchange with each other was so intense and so real. It felt, again, legitimate. It felt like a real movie. I think we see in a lot of movies there's kind of a laxed nature to performances, and performances are either too strong where it feels like they're trying to make a legitimate movie, or they're just too light and it doesn't really feel like the movie is going somewhere. And so I was really captivated by this clip. I'm like, I gotta check this show out. So I essentially binge watched season 2. I didn't watch season 1. I will get back to that. But I feel like I'm not hearing a lot about Lioness, and I'm like, someone's got to talk about it. And I got to say, like, spoiler free, if you haven't seen the show Lioness, I'm definitely recommending it. If you kind of want to know what is Lioness, what's it about, I would really say that Lioness is kind of the middle ground between Mission Impossible and Sicario. Because in very much it's more of the Sicario type of movie. I really love Sicario. I haven't seen the second one, but the first one I thought that's the same. That's Danny Villeneuve, the director of Dune. Sorry if I butchered your name, but yeah, Lioness has this Sicario quality where it just feels like we're in on these missions. We're in with a little bit of the politics of why things are happening. We have Nicole Kidman, who plays the head of the Lioness program. And I'm forgetting the actor's name. I'm going to put him right here. The actor who appeared in Man of Steel, he shows up in all Zack Snyder stuff. He was in House of Cards. Great actor. He plays the deputy of the chief of security of this. I forget what exactly this is called. But essentially, the Lioness program is a CIA black bag or black ops group that essentially they carry out hit missions whenever something is not about arresting someone, but it's truly about knocking out an enemy before they can do something to America. That's what the Lioness program does. And Zoe Saldana is essentially the leader of the ground team that carries out those operations. So we get a really good first episode that just establishes what all of that is. We have the kidnapping of a senator, and Zoe Saldana and her team are dispatched to go rescue her. And it's a really, this is where we get into that super, at first it's kind of Mission Impossible, but I would say Mission Impossible 1. Mission Impossible 1 to me is a legitimate spy movie. And anything after that, I do love Mission Impossible 2, but anything after the first two is just an action movie that happens to feature spies. No offense, JJ. No offense, writer of Usual Suspects, Dennis McCurry. But yeah, I really thoroughly enjoyed this first episode that just kind of establishes that kind of sort of Mission Impossible. Here's your mission. Here's your timeline. I kind of need a longer timeline than this. No, here's your timeline. You got to do this now. And then we get into that sort of Sicario. We're going into Mexico to fight a cartel, but it's black ops, so no one can know that it's us. But we're doing it to rescue a U.S. senator. So very, very kick-ass first episode, and the action is cinematic. The action delivers on a movie level. And when we get to episode 2, that's where we get into Genesis Rodriguez's character. So we have the whole, in episode 2, there's more intel. They start to figure out who the bad guy is that they're looking for. And their best way in is Genesis Rodriguez's character, who is a helicopter pilot. And I like how this show flows. It has a really good flow. On the one hand, you have this Mission Impossible 1 meets Sicario thing going on. And on the other hand, you have Zoe Saldana, who's trying to go home to see her family in between missions. And, she has a good relationship with her husband and her kids. You get some family hijinks that's very adorable. Great cast for the family. I recognize the husband from somewhere, but I don't quite know where. But yeah, so what's amazing with the introduction of Zoe Saldana's character, with the introduction of Genesis Rodriguez's character, you don't see her face right away. What happens is Zoe Saldana and her team are on the way to meet up with her, and they get ambushed in Iraq by this whole group of who knows what type of criminals who are ambushing them, trying to shoot them down. And this Black Hawk, or this whatever type of helicopter it is that's armed to the teeth, just zooms in and fires and annihilates everybody. It goes in twice, and the way the music and the sound merge, and this kind of, the music kind of kicks down, and you just kind of hear the sound of destruction, and it's there's something so powerful and eerie and again cinematic about it. Like this was a perfectly directed episode that we don't know who did it, although we know it's set up that Genesis Rodriguez is a fighter pilot, but we don't know for sure that that's her until they get to base and she lands and we get to that scene, which is her first scene, the scene that got me interested in watching this because I'm like, look, I for the longest time I studied directors and I would follow directors, but lately I don't know, I've kind of just been watching anything. I don't know. I'm just kind of opening up my doors now. I'll still always watch something directed by Guillermo del Toro, but lately I've been watching more television and I've been watching different types of movies I would never watch, and shows I would never watch. So Lioness was the opportunity. Like, look, let's see what this clip is about, and the clip still played 100% solid and emotional and real when Genesis is like literally at the point of crying because she's like, some of my men died transporting you. Why did you come this way? Like the way things laid out were not good. And that's kind of an interesting element of the entire show is that every single episode, Zoe Saldana and her team are put on a pressure cooker to do something very quickly, a lot of times with intel that's incomplete, that she herself says we need more time to make sure we know what we're doing and to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And the problem is that, well, the bad guys are moving faster than we have time to give you that perfect intel for. So they end up recruiting Genesis Rodriguez into the team, and it's still such a great scene. I love the scene between Zoe and Genesis where she's asking her to join the team, but the way she asks her is, "Do you love your country?" And Genesis is like, "I joined the military. I've been here for years. Of course, I love my country." And that's not. She's not saying yes. You know. She's so. This is a particular scene that I want to say is good for filmmakers to look to. If you're a writer, if you're a storyteller, a lot of times in television, I hate dialogue. I think writers are way too writery. They want to be some writer that they're not. You can just tell. You can just tell. But like, if you're not Aaron Sorkin, please don't try to write like Aaron Sorkin. Write like you. Write with your strength. And I do feel like, just to draw a comparison, when I watched Paradise, I could not get through the first 45 minutes of that episode because I just thought the dialogue was so callous. It just really didn't define the characters very well. I could just feel from my filmmaker ears that they're way overstuffing setups to be paid off later. And the dialogue just didn't feel natural. And it could have also been the editor. Maybe the editor was cutting it too tight. But it really just felt like there's too many lines here. We don't need this much dialogue. There's a lot of moments, and I'm just talking the first 45 minutes. Every time James Marsden talks to this lead character, I just thought his character sounded phony. And I don't blame James Marsden. I blame the dialogue. Because there's just moments where I felt like if you cut out a line or two, if you would have, the just confidence within yourself to say, hey, that line doesn't work. Cut it out. Cut out a line or two and let there be some silence and breath that would let the lines that do work land. Then I can watch this show and not feel like you're just trying to force some Aaron Sorkin style dialogue down my ears. I don't like that. I don't appreciate that. I feel like, to me, it shows that either you don't know as much about politics or whatever, or just don't know how people talk. You know what I mean? I don't like that. So with all that bashing aside, what I like about this scene is that, look, here we are. We have the leader of a team of Black Ops individuals who can never officially say anything to anyone ever, and she basically has to convince this army pilot to join her team, but she can't say exactly what she's going to do, and she can't say what's going to happen, but she needs her to comply. And so she just keeps asking her the question, do you love your country? Later on, this is brought up, and it's like, it's kind of coercion. You're kind of pushing her to say yes. But the fact of the matter is, this is a great scene that's an example of what's the writing between the lines. Like, Zoe Saldana never says a line more than is needed to convey what her character is after. And I think that rings true for everyone who plays her bosses, like Nicole Kidman and the other actors. Morgan Freeman's in this show. He's the Secretary of Defense. And not a single line is wasted. Every line matters, and everyone feels like they're legitimately a part of what they're supposed to do, even though I don't actually know. But their seriousness, the curtness, the fact of the matter that every now and then you can't say things because things have to be done, but they can't be officially be done by the White House or whatever it is. And this scene, I think, best exemplifies, do you love your country? And what she's asking is, are you willing to join the Lioness program? Are you willing to die, potentially? Are you willing to commit acts that might be morally gray? Because prior to this little bit of dialogue, Genesis Rodriguez says, I know people who have been pulled into the Lioness program, and I've watched them come back dead. And so she realizes that there's huge gravity to what she's being asked. Literally being brought to tears trying to say, I do love my country, but she's not saying yes to joining the Lioness program. That yes is all that Zoe Saldana is after. This is something that I also learned in screenwriting class from both excellent teachers, Michael Braverman and James D'Alessandro, who've written for television and movies for a long time. But they would say, a lot of times when people talk to each other, they don't actually answer yes or no. Or even if people really do in the real world, that's not necessarily what makes good writing or good dialogue. Good writing, good dialogue should sound natural, but again, you have to have something that's read between the lines, and ultimately you have to have a conflict that is present. It doesn't necessarily mean fighting. When Genesis Rodriguez and Zoe Saldana meet, they are actually fighting. They're yelling at each other. They're pushing each other back and forth. They have to be separated by another, I think a staff sergeant or something like that. They are fighting when they first talk. But this little conflict, do you love your country? That is, in every way, it's subtext, because Genesis won't say yes until the very end of the scene. Every single answer is a diversion. It's kind of her trying not to say yes, but you kind of feel that a part of her wants to. So not only do we have the conflict between them both, of her not wanting to outright say yes, or her, not wanting to give in to Zoe Saldana, who she's already angry at. But you see the inner conflict within herself. It's like, do I want to do something potentially dangerous and more life-threatening than what I'm already doing, but it could also be something great that is absolutely necessary, that I am clearly best suited to do. That inner conflict is so crucial to the scene. I think it's a standout scene that deserves pointing out. And again, the directing is perfect. It's really, it knows when to give people close-ups. It knows when to give people space. The shot choices are very strong. This is something that I don't think a lot of people who want to direct understand, the importance of your shot choices. Are they telling the story or not? Because I'm seeing more and more in movies and shows, there's less and less of that. There's again, going back to Paradise, there's a lot of pretty shots, a lot of nicely framed shots. But what's the story? You know what I mean? If everyone's just doing fine, what's the story? There must be something going on. You can't have nothing going on and say, oh, well, it's because things are going to change. Well, there's still got to be something there. And I think the strength of every episode of this season, but particularly the scene I'm talking about, is that there's something going on all the time. And it just keeps the show alive in a cinematic way. And I can't really get into every single episode, but I love the team. I absolutely love Zoe Saldana's team. Every single character. There's a bit more pudgy character with a beard. I think he's funny. There's a character named Bobby who's a chick with a mohawk haircut, and she's exciting and great. One of my favorite scenes is they're all crashing at another character's house in between missions, and she has this line where she's telling the more pudgy guy, whatever you guys are spewing when you're farting in the middle of the night is not something I want to live through, or whatever she's saying. She says this whole long line. It's kind of too much. It's almost writery. And then the guy says, what does that mean? And she says, it means I love you. And I thought, well, okay, that's cool. You can save potentially a bad line with, a character just opening up just a little bit like that, because these characters don't do that for much of the show. There's a lot of fun conflict between the characters, even though they're getting along. There's apparently some history between Bobby and the trainer guy who tries to show Genesis Rodriguez how to handle their operations. And he basically has to give her kind of this crash course through everything, just so she knows the basics of how their team works. So that the training episode's good. Eventually we meet the bad guy, or technically the bad guy who's beneath the real bad guy. And mini spoilers here, the bad guy that we meet ends up being Genesis Rodriguez's father. So a lot of drama there. And I also really love, halfway through the show, we get the introduction of a character, Cruz. Apparently she was the Lioness in season 1. And Cruz was great. I thought just right from the jump, this is another actor I can just feel she's so lived in. And that's the best thing about all these actors and everyone in the show. Everyone feels lived in to their characters. Nobody feels like they're just kind of acting like they do their job. They all feel very lived in. I think, again, another thing a lot of our blockbuster movies suffer from is that they're not spending time on the character because they're spending time on the spectacle. They forget storytelling comes first. The audience responds to, how do I feel watching these people interact? Oh, but let me get back to the father. Genesis Rodriguez, her scene with the dad, and all of her scenes with Cruz, which end up being one big confrontation, they're fantastic. Like the actress, the reason I came to watch this show, every single scene she's in is an emotionally gripping moment. But on one of their missions, while they're taking out these bad guys, they discover an entire warehouse full of human trafficked children. And so she's questioning whether she should be part of this team. Cruz tells her, I know this mission is terrible and it's asking you to face things that you don't want to face. But if you choose not to fight, not fighting is what leads to warehouses being full of children. And that's a very, very powerful line. Considering that this season is about Genesis Rodriguez, she doesn't know it. It takes some time for it to be revealed that this is about her infiltrating her own family. This is very similar to Alfred Hitchcock's Notorious. And Mission Impossible 2 gets some criticism for being like, hey, this is basically Notorious, but the action movie version. But I love that. I think that's okay. Like, as long as you're referring to a high quality product when you're making your movie or short or a show, you're referring to something that, it's okay. Every spy movie requires making a personal relationship with someone who you're going to betray, or utilizing, or if you look at like cop movies where someone's undercover and sometimes they are already part of the family. You know, gangster movies do it all the time where it's like all of these stories always involve a personal relationship that has to be compromised for the sake of justice or for the sake of stopping something heinous. And so to me, I don't really consider it copying so much as a genuine homage, but also, hey, this is also real. And I really appreciate that Notorious was kind of, it was vaguely there, it was vaguely present, but it was not overwhelming. I think Mission Impossible 2, far more guilty of replicating Notorious. I still love that movie. And especially when it comes to a head with her father. And she basically tells him they're onto you and you have to work with us or basically we're going to kill you. And Cruz is there to help her out. She has a very interesting, very sudden friendship with Cruz, which I really like. It comes off very naturally. But I love that, and a mini spoiler again, when Genesis Rodriguez confronts her father, and he won't admit to anything. You know, he won't admit to being part of this criminal organization, but he just gets up and starts slapping her in the face. And it's such a, I'm like, hey, don't be slapping Genesis Rodriguez, man. And that's your daughter, man. But then when Cruz steps in, it's such an epic moment where she just throws him to the ground and literally puts her foot on his throat and it's like, you're done now. And it's an epic moment because he's already spent 30 minutes of this episode complaining about women and weak men in the military and stuff like that, and then he gets put down by a woman. But it just feels legit. I believe that this could be happening. You know, she doesn't do any crazy acrobatics or silly movements. It really, the way it's shot, the way it feels like a legitimate moment. Cruz is one badass B. I gotta say, I love this actress too. I'll be keeping my eyes open for whenever I see her show up. But yeah, but that being said, the show keeps making me forget that it's a show and keeps making me feel like I'm watching a movie that's continually unfolding. And when we build up to the finale, which is this huge action set piece that is on a big cinema level, and it really is one of those you don't know if the heroes are going to make it out or not type of sequences. My only problem with it is I wish Genesis Rodriguez got to raise a little bit more hell because she does get to fly a helicopter. It's a little bit misleading when she gets this epic introduction in the second episode, but in the finale, she doesn't get quite as much as I would like her to do. But on the other hand, we do have an entire team. Everyone needs to kind of play their part. And it's actually cool seeing, you know, after a whole season of setup and seeing different people do different parts and different missions, when you see the entire team engaged in this big battle at the end. It's a really satisfying cinematic experience. And another thing I hate that TV shows do, again, when it's too much talking, but that's not what you would do in a movie. That's something that always bothers me. Literally, that actually happens in episode 2, where in the Situation Room, it's laid out what their plan is with Genesis Rodriguez and what's going to be going down the line. And there was a perfect moment to cut that scene, which is when, after hearing everything, Morgan Freeman goes, "Do it," and then just cut to the next scene where they're there doing it. But then it kind of keeps going on, and he pulls one of the characters aside and says, "Make sure this happens this kind of way, the right kind of way, or whatever," which is fine. And then we cut to the characters on the road in Iraq, and they're on the phone call. "You're approved," and I'm like, well, you know, I don't think we actually need it. I think that's one of those scenes where I don't think the dialogue was necessarily wasted. I feel like this is natural to what's happening in the scene. But if this was a movie, if it was a movie, it would be "do it," and then they're driving and they're doing it. But things like that I think is fine. I really feel like You know, in this, that's a situation where you got to use that twister film language. Do it in that tight, beautiful close up, and then start wide in Iraq and push in on our team driving through the desert. You know what I mean? I think that's one of those situations. Cut that extra dialogue because you just don't need it. It's not bad. It's not holding the scene back or anything. But you just don't need it. If this was a movie, cut that out. Get straight to a wide shot, push it in on the thing. But that's, that doesn't really matter because to me, again, the strength of the show is that even when with moments like that, or even when there are moments where I think this is starting to get boring, there's always a little turn. Everything's always leading to something that's like, oh, you kind of need to know this because this is the pressure that this character is under, and it will add up later. And you really understand that this, even though Nicole Kidman and Morgan Freeman, even though everyone in that situation room isn't involved with the action, and they're not in the majority of every episode, everything that happens still circles back and affects them. So this is, I think, this season at least, because I haven't seen season one. I think it's a really effective, excellent example of keeping your writing tight. The directing's very tight. Everything flows, and it's a TV show. So even though moments like "Do It," I wish it would cut. That's fine. The show, it works too well overall. I consider that a nitpick. I consider that just a me fantasy thing of I know this would happen in a movie, and it's okay. So I want to say just hats off to the producers, directors, writers, creators, and obviously the cast. All the whole cast and crew. I don't care if you just did catering on this show. Good job. Unless you made someone sick. Something to think about. Anyway, Lioness season 2. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. You've got to check this show out. And thank you very much for watching. Hopefully, I'll see you next time.